Harold Winters shuffled into First National Bank every Thursday at precisely 10:15 a.m., dressed in the same worn tweed jacket and carrying a battered leather briefcase. At 78, with his wild white hair and outdated clothes, he was a familiar sight to the bank employees and a source of amusement. The tellers would exchange knowing glances when he approached, preparing for his weekly routine. "Good morning," Harold would say with unexpected dignity. "I'm here to inspect my establishment." The staff humored him with polite smiles. For years, Harold had maintained that he was the rightful owner of the bank, despite all evidence to the contrary. Most considered him a harmless eccentric, perhaps touched by dementia or loneliness. Even the bank manager, Thomas Green, had instructed his staff to be kind but dismissive. "Just play along," Thomas had told them during a staff meeting last year. "He's probably lonely and needs somewhere to belong. It's harmless enough." Harold's routine rarely varied. After his grand entrance, he would make a slow circuit of the lobby, pausing occasionally to study a potted plant or examine the grain of the wooden countertops. Sometimes he'd stop near a teller's window, observing transactions with intense concentration. Young tellers found this unnerving at first, but veterans like Marge Watson would simply offer him a candy from her desk drawer. "Care for a peppermint, Mr. Winters?" she'd ask, and he'll accept with a formal nod, as if receiving tribute from a loyal subject. Behind his back, the younger employees had nicknames for him: the Governor, the Phantom Owner, and most commonly, Old Man Delusion. They'd snicker when he'd pull out a small, leather-bound notebook and jot down observations in tight, meticulous handwriting. "Checking the books again, sir?" joked Derek, the most brazen of the junior loan officers, one Thursday morning. Harold had merely smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "Everything must be accounted for, young man. That's the first rule of banking." What no one noticed was how Harold's keen eyes took in every detail as he moved through the lobby: the new teller positions, the security camera installations, the changing of staff. No one thought to question why he meticulously recorded these observations in his notebook, or why he would occasionally ask seemingly innocent questions about new security protocols or software upgrades. On particularly busy days, he would sit in the waiting area, apparently content to watch the ebb and flow of customers. His gaze would linger on certain wealthy patrons, and he'd sometimes nod to them as if they shared a secret understanding. Most ignored him. A few would smile back politely, assuming he had mistaken them for someone else. Lisa Chen, the head of operations, was the only one who showed any real concern. "There's something off about him," she'd mentioned to Thomas once. "He asks too many specific questions." "About what?" Thomas had asked, distracted by quarterly reports. "Last week, he wanted to know all about our new merger discussions." How would he even know about those? Thomas had waved away her concerns. Coincidence? He probably heard two employees gossiping. But everything changed the day West Cork Financial announced their hostile takeover of First National Bank. As employees gathered around television screens watching the news in shock, Harold stood in the corner, a knowing smile crossing his weathered face. "It's beginning," he whispered to himself, clutching his briefcase tighter. "Time to show them who really holds the cards." 6 months later, First National Bank held an open house celebration. The lobby, once austere and traditional, now blended modern design with historic touches. The walls were transformed with photographs showing the bank's evolution, many featuring a young, visionary Harold Winters breaking ground at branch locations or shaking hands with community leaders decades ago. Sunlight streamed through newly installed skylights, illuminating the historic marble columns that Harold had insisted on preserving during the renovation. Community members mingled with employees, sampling catered hors d'oeuvres and admiring the new community meeting space where a stodgy loan department had once stood. Harold, now serving as chairman emeritus, moved through the crowd with ease. He no longer needed to pretend to be frail, but neither did he attempt to hide his age. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit with a blue pocket square, he paused often to chat with longtime customers, many of whom were astonished to discover the eccentric old man they'd ignored for years was actually the bank's legendary founder. I had no idea, confessed Eleanor Whitman, a local business owner. You approved my first business loan in 1983, then you disappeared, and all these years you were watching over us. Harold smiled. Sometimes the best leadership happens from behind the scenes. Near the newly unveiled Community Investment Center, Lisa stood beside Harold, explaining the new microfinance initiative to a group of small business owners. In her 6 months as executive vice president, she had completely reimagined the bank's relationship with the community. This program specifically targets businesses that have been denied traditional funding, she explained, her confidence evident in every gesture. When the group dispersed, she turned to Harold. The first round of applications is already double what we projected. Harold nodded approvingly. You've turned this bank around, he said. Our community portfolios are stronger than ever, and employee morale is at an all-time high. I had a good teacher, Lisa replied. Although you could have just told me who you were instead of letting me think you were a confused old man. Harold chuckled. Would you have believed me? Sometimes people need to discover the truth for themselves. Together, they moved toward the center of the lobby where a small stage had been set up. Thomas Green, still serving as bank president, tapped the microphone and welcomed everyone to the unveiling of the Harrison Winterson Scholarship Fund for Community Finance. This program, Thomas announced, will provide full tuition for 5 local students annually who commit to careers in community-focused banking and development. As applause filled the lobby, Harold whispered to Lisa, "A bank isn't just a place that holds money, Lisa. It's a place that holds dreams for homes, education, businesses." I didn't fight to maintain control because of pride or money. I did it because I made a promise to this community 50 years ago. Later, as the celebration wound down, a young teller named Mia approached Harold tentatively, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Sir, I just wanted to apologize. I was one of the people who thought you were just a confused old man. I even nicknamed you Loony Harold behind your back." She looked down ashamed. Harold smiled gently. "No apology needed, my dear. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage one can have. Remember that lesson." As Harold walked through his bank one last time that evening, running his fingers along the counters and walls he had originally built, he reflected on the journey. From a young man with nothing but ambition to an old man pretending to have nothing, only to reveal he had everything that truly mattered: purpose, principles, and the power to protect what he built. The security guard held the door. "Good night, Mr. Winterson. See you Thursday at 10:15. Harold chuckled. "Old habits die hard, Robert." "Yes, I'll be here, but maybe this time I'll leave the tweed jacket at home." Word spread quickly among the employees. The crazy old man was actually Harrison Winterson, the bank's mysterious founder who had disappeared from public life decades ago. By noon, the bank buzzed with whispered conversations and surreptitious glances toward Thomas's office, where Harold had been ensconced for hours. Many remained skeptical, especially Lisa Chen, the young head of operations who had often been the target of Harold's most detailed questioning. At 32, Lisa had risen through the ranks on sheer talent and determination. She'd studied the bank's history as part of her MBA thesis. Nowhere had she found evidence that Harrison Winterson was still alive, let alone shuffling around their lobby every Thursday. "This has to be some elaborate hoax," Lisa insisted during a private meeting with Thomas and several board members in the conference room. She paced along the glass wall, gesturing sharply. "Even if he founded the bank, he sold it. He has no power here." Board member Eleanor Taft frowned. "But the documents could be forgeries," Lisa countered, "and conveniently timed ones at that. What better moment to claim ownership than during a crisis when we're all desperate for a savior?" Thomas opened his mouth to respond when the bank's attorney, Malcolm Reed, entered the room. His normally composed face was ashen, his bow tie slightly askew. In his hands, he clutched a thick folder bearing the bank's logo from decades past. "We've verified the documents," he announced, his voice barely above a whisper. "All of them." Not only did Mr. Winterson maintain a 17% ownership stake through a series of shell companies, but the original sale included a poison pill provision that no one bothered to research. He swallowed hard. In the event of a hostile takeover, his ownership stake triples automatically. The room fell silent. Lisa's pacing stopped abruptly. That would make him the majority shareholder. Harold finished, entering the room without knocking. Gone was the shuffling gait and the tweed jacket. Instead, he wore a perfectly tailored suit that had been delivered by courier, his wild hair now neatly combed back. The transformation was startling. Decades seemed to have fallen away from his bearing. "That's impossible," whispered Eleanor. "The board would have known." "The board," Harold said, settling into the head chair with natural authority, "has been impressively negligent in reviewing the founding documents. A fact I've counted on for years." Lisa crossed her arms. "So now what? You waltz in and take over after decades of absence." Harold regarded her with unexpected warmth. "I admire skepticism, Ms. Chen. It's why I've been watching you most closely. Your resistance to my presence showed intelligence." He turned to the others. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. We have work to do." That night, Harold worked from a suite at the Carlisle Hotel, surrounded by papers, laptops, and a small team of loyal employees who had been vetted and recruited by Thomas. Lisa, still dubious but professionally curious, joined them reluctantly. As they dug deeper into Westcorp's history, a disturbing pattern emerged. Spreadsheets, news articles, and internal memos revealed that Westcorp's takeover attempt was actually a scheme to strip the bank's assets and close its local branches, devastating the community that depended on First National. "They've done this before," Lisa said, staring at a map showing closed banks across the Northeast. "Buy, strip, abandon?" For the first time, her doubt wavered. As dawn broke, Harold looked out over the city he had spent his life building. The skyline was silhouetted against the pink-orange sunrise, and far below, early commuters began their day, unaware of the battle brewing over their financial future. "They think an old man can't fight back," he murmured, his reflection overlaid on the city he loved. "They're about to learn a very expensive lesson." The boardroom had never been so full. Regular board members sat nervously alongside Westcorp executives. Legal teams from both sides lined the walls, and a selection of employees, including Lisa, had been invited to observe. The room hummed with tension. Conversations conducted in hurried whispers that died away as the clock struck 8. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Harold Winters entered, flanked by his own legal team and financial advisors. He'd abandoned any pretense of frailty, walking with measured, confident steps to the head of the table. Behind him came Thomas, carrying a stack of leather portfolios. Charles Denton, Westcorp's ruthless CEO, occupied the opposite end of the table. Tall and shark-like in his tailored Italian suit, he projected an aura of impatient authority. His silver hair was precision-cut, his manicured fingernails drumming a steady rhythm on the polished mahogany. "Mr. Winterson," Denton said, deliberately using Harold's birth name, "this is certainly theatrical, but ultimately futile. Our deal is moving forward regardless of your emergence from retirement." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Everyone had received calls from Westcorp's representatives overnight, some with veiled threats, others with promises of positions in the new organization. Harold didn't respond immediately. Instead, he nodded to Thomas, who began distributing the leather portfolios to everyone present. The sound of folders opening filled the room, followed by a collective intake of breath. "Inside," Harold said, his voice carrying effortlessly, "you'll find evidence that Westcorp has systematically targeted small banks, stripped them of assets, and abandoned local communities in 5 states. You'll also find documentation of their pending legal troubles that they've conveniently failed to disclose to shareholders." Denton's face flushed crimson. He flipped through the pages, his expression darkening. "These are baseless accusations." Page 27. Harold interrupted calmly. "The SEC investigation begins next month. I have friends in many places, Mr. Denton. Some who still remember the young banker who gave them their first business loans 50 years ago." Lisa, watching from her seat near the window, saw the exact moment doubt crept into the Westcorp executives' faces. She glanced down at her own copy, detailed timelines of community impacts, branch closures, and lost jobs following previous West Corp acquisitions. As board members frantically flipped through the documents, Harold continued, "I've also exercised my right as majority shareholder to call for a vote on the takeover. And I've brought proxy votes from 16 major stakeholders who trust my judgment." He removed an envelope from his jacket pocket, sliding it toward the board secretary. "You'll find everything in order." The room erupted in chaos. Denton slammed his fist on the table, rattling water glasses. "This is impossible. You can't have arranged all this in 24 hours. Harold's eyes twinkled, the first glimpse of the eccentric old man showing through his polished exterior. "I've been preparing for this day for 7 years, Mr. Denton, every Thursday at 10:15, while you were busy building your empire of sand." Denton's legal counsel whispered urgently in his ear. The man's expression shifted from anger to disbelief, then to carefully concealed panic. "We need to verify these proxy votes," Denton insisted, grasping for control. "By all means," Harold replied. "While you do, perhaps we should discuss the matter of your company's undisclosed liabilities, the ones that would trigger automatic review clauses in your acquisition contract." Thomas Green was having the worst day of his career. With West Corp's takeover looming, he faced the impossible task of telling his staff that layoffs were inevitable. His normally tidy desk was buried under financial reports, each one bleaker than the last. The bank's stock had plummeted 22% since the announcement, and West Corp executives were already scheduling efficiency evaluations. He loosened his tie and rubbed his temples. 3 generations of his family had banked here. He'd started as a teller while in college, worked his way up over 20 years. Now it would all become another soulless branch of a corporate giant. As he prepared for the emergency meeting, his office door creaked open, revealing Harold Winters. "Not now, Mr. Winters," Thomas sighed. "We're in the middle of a crisis." Harold closed the door behind him and straightened to his full height, suddenly appearing less frail than usual. "I know about the takeover, Thomas. I've been expecting it." Something in Harold's tone made Thomas pause. The old man's voice had changed, the mumbling uncertainty replaced by clear, commanding speech. For the first time, Thomas truly looked at Harold, noticing the sharp intelligence behind those eyes. "Who are you, really?" Thomas asked, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Harold placed his battered briefcase on the desk and clicked it open. Inside were documents bearing the bank's original charter from 1953, along with transfer certificates and stock options dating back decades. The papers were immaculate, preserved in plastic sleeves, organized with colored tabs. "I'm Harold Winters. I founded this bank 52 years ago under my birth name, Harrison Winterson." He removed his glasses, standing straighter. "I built it from nothing, expanded it across 3 states, then sold it to a holding company in '89, with certain conditions and retained shares that few know about." Thomas's mouth went dry. "That's impossible." Harrison Winterson disappeared from public life 30 years ago. Some said he died in Europe. "A convenient story I encouraged," Harold said, removing a folder containing newspaper clippings. "The eccentric founder who cashed out and vanished." Thomas stared in disbelief as Harold produced more evidence. Photographs of a younger Harold cutting ribbons at bank openings, newspaper profiles from the 1970s calling him Connecticut's banking wonderkind, and legal documents with signatures that matched perfectly with recent forms Harold had filled out during his visits. But why pretend to be? Thomas struggled for words, his worldview reshaping itself before his eyes. A senile old man. Harold smiled, revealing perfect teeth that had always been hidden behind his mumbling lips. "Because, my boy, the best way to understand how your legacy is being managed is to become invisible. People speak freely around those they don't respect. They reveal secrets, plans, weaknesses." Harold walked to the window, looking out at the bank lobby. "I've watched 4 managers come and go, observed countless policy changes, witnessed every mistake and triumph." He turned back to Thomas. "You've done well, considering the board's constraints. Better than most would have." Thomas felt a strange mix of validation and embarrassment. But why reveal yourself now? Harold's face hardened. Because West Corp isn't just acquiring a bank. They're dismantling my life's work. And now that they're making their move, he tapped the documents. I need to become visible again.